one of the things that we did differently this year, which we haven't in the past, is we polled all of the students who were registered for the conference and asked them some questions kind of in advance about, we let them know Don was going to be here and just said, what kind of questions do you have for him? And so we got some great responses, and I'm going to go through a couple of them today and talk to Don about it, get his thoughts on it. And then we have plenty of time. We'll open it up to some questions from all of you in the audience. So as we're going through this, think about some questions that you might have, please. All right, so the first question I have for you, Don, is, what are, let's say, 2 or 3 most pivotal moments in your career where you really learned something from the experience and kind of set you up for where you're at today?
Yeah, Chris was showed me this question, so I had some time to think about it, which is always helpful. I would give you 1 from the military, 1 from the Marine Corps, and then 2 from business. And you can't make this stuff up, and I'm sure this is akin to a lot of your experience. So I'd been in the Marine Corps. Those of you who are Marines know it takes quite a while before you actually get to an FMF unit. So I went through OCS, went through the basic school for 7 months, and then went to artillery school at Fort Sill with the Army. So I was in the Marine Corps for 15 months before I ever got to a line unit. And I had really a hardship duty in Hawaii. So I went to Kaneohe, and when I got to Kaneohe, I was attached to 112, was 1st Battalion, 12th Marines, was attached to 3rd Marine Regiment. And my battery was training on the Big Island of Hawaii. We would go over there and do live fire exercises for weeks at a time. So they flew me over there, and I jeeped out to the firing point so I could meet the battery commander and the battery gunnery sergeant. And just as I got there, they'd been in the field for about 3 or 4 days. They'd just sea rations for 3 or 4 days. And there was a base camp, and the CO, as a kind of a treat for the troops, said, well, let's get some hot chow out here. So they were trucking food out from the base camp, and everybody was starting to line up to get the food. So I'm pretty hungry. I've been up since like 5:30 in the morning. I'm flying over there. I'm ready to eat. So I start walking to the front of this line. And the battery gunnery sergeant grabs me by the back of my neck, basically, grabs my camouflage utilities, and he said, wait a second, Lieutenant. He said, in the field, the men always eat first. If there's any left, you can have some. I said, okay, I got it, Gunny. And I've never forgotten that, and it's always, always about your people. It's not about you. And that was indelibly imprinted on my brain housing group, that you always have to think about your people. They are what is going to make you successful, or they're going to make you look bad. So take care of your people and show genuine concern for them. This can't be faked. We all know that. So do you really care about them more than you care about yourself? That's number 1. Number 2, I think, was, I did do 7, 8 years in marketing before I looked at a different type of job. And I was at Frito-Lay at the time. And the guy who was running national sales for Frito-Lay was a former Army officer, Vietnam veteran. And we were basically changing the business model at Frito-Lay and going away from, Mike described these vertical functions at Microsoft, sales, finance. Well, we have a more matrix organization at Clorox where, people do report into the business leader as well as into their functional leader. So I did that for 3 years, and that changed my life in the sense that all of a sudden I had run a large sales organization, and I had this first-hand customer experience that a lot of marketing people never had a chance to have. And the third one was just going to South Africa, getting a very different international experience, running a business in a country where, those values I talked about, those traits, they were as effective with Zulus in South Africa as they were with people from Dallas. Everybody responds to those same traits. And if you run an organization that way, it can be very effective.
Thank you, thank you. So another question that people were very interested in is, I think, and this is true whether you're a veteran or you're not a veteran, is that when we experience success, it makes us feel very confident. But when we fail at something, in some ways, that becomes a really great learning experience for us to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
Have you experienced any failures throughout the course of your career? How did you learn from them, and how did you move on?
Yeah. I think the one that's really indelibly imprinted in my head is when I left Frito-Lay about 20 years ago, I took a step back. You know, the general talked about you got to become a company commander again. Well, I was general manager of a division of Frito-Lay, and Coca-Cola recruited me to be senior vice president of marketing for the Minute Maid company. And I said, you know, I've already run a marketing function. I don't want to go backwards. And they said, well, take a step back because it's going to leapfrog you later because, you know, we think you can run this company someday, but you're going to have to do this. And I said, okay, I'll do it. Because I really wanted to get into a company like Coke where I saw the international opportunities were pretty broad. So I went into Minute Maid, and within the first 4 months I was there, we had to put together the business plans for the next year. Well, I was this hotshot marketer and former GM, and I'm going to show these guys how to crank up the RPMs in this sleepy old juice company. So we put together a marketing campaign for 1995 that was the envy of the world. We loaded up that 500-pound wagon with about 1,000 pounds of initiatives. And then we launched them, and we fell flat on our face because I didn't understand the organization well enough to know its capability and capacity to execute. And I tried to cram too much into a year to really set the world on fire. And I said, I will never do that again. I will never put a plan together without really understanding the capacity and the capability of an organization to execute it. So that year was a disaster for us. We had a $125 million profit plan. We made $25 million. And it wasn't all because of that. It was it was a perfect storm of problems that hit that company that year. But it was certainly a contributing factor. And so I learned that I would never try and cram 1,000 pounds of initiatives in a 500-pound truck again.
Makes a lot of sense. So one of the other things, too, I think, which is interesting for these people, it sounds like you've had some people in the military that you've interacted with throughout the course of your career. And that's fortunate if we're able to do that. For some of us, we're trying to break into new industries where we may or may not have an opportunity to connect with veterans who know our backgrounds and kind of can shepherd and mentor our ways through there. So one of the questions I think that we have is, throughout the course of your career, have you experienced any sort of adversity simply by being the fact that you were a veteran, and how did you address that, and what advice do you have for those of us who are in a position now?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. In 1981, when I came out of the Marine Corps, just put it in perspective, unemployment was 10.8%, inflation was running 12%, and interest rates were 14%. My first mortgage in Cincinnati was 14%. It's like put it on a credit card. So there have always been difficult times, some more obviously than others, but when I got there, it was really interesting. I was the first Marine to be hired in brand management. We had other JMOs from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. But I was the first Marine they brought in, so I was in the paper division, and the young woman who greeted me that day, I was working on a brand group with her. After I'd been there about 2 months, she told me, she said, boy, you know, you're quite different than what we expected. I said, how so? Well, you were supposed to be chain smoker, tattooed up, and swearing and spitting tobacco, because that's the image we had of the Marine Corps. I said, well, it's a little different than what you guys thought. But you do have those, you know, kind of silly biases about it. I think the important thing is it's amazing how much help people want to give you as a veteran if you ask for it. And if you go in with a sense of humility that, look, I really don't know what I'm doing here. And I didn't have a business background, so that compounded my sense of humility. But if you go in with a sense of humility and really ask for help, it's amazing how people respond to that and want to help. And it took off from there.
All right, so I have one or two questions, then we'll open it up. I think one of the things we're interested in is, as a CEO, one of your major responsibilities is trying to meet the expectations of the analysts on the street.
I love them dearly.
You love them. What are the challenges with that, and how does that play, and how do you manage that?
Well, one of the ways you manage it is you can't take it personally. I mean, we have 20 sell-side analysts who cover the Clorox Company. We had 19 of the 20 out in Pleasanton, California at our new innovation center 2 weeks ago. And we do this every other year, a major presentation about the evolution of strategy. And, and I think Wayne and his group and the other functions out there just blew away these analysts in terms of our innovation capabilities. But despite that, and everybody was raving about it at the time, you know, a week later, one of our friendly analysts downgrades the stock. In fact, he downgraded it yesterday. We got most of it back. He didn't have much of an impact. But I'm going, wasn't this guy there? Wasn't he one of the ones telling me how good it was? You can't take this stuff personally, but I think that, so that's one thing you do to manage the analyst. The other thing is you've got to be extremely transparent and straightforward. It's like Mike was saying, when you do these earnings calls, we've got an earnings call coming up on Halloween, so we'll all dress up for that one. But you've got to be extremely to the point, transparent, and I think we've built up, certainly in the 7 years I've been there, some real credibility with the street that we deliver. I mean, at the end of the day, if you deliver the numbers and you generate some real reservoirs of credibility with these people, you're fine. But it is about execution. It is about delivering the numbers, and you've got to do it on a consistent basis, and you've got to be transparent, and you can't take it personally, and you can. You know, it's interesting, if you actually ask these people for advice, if you really probe them on why they wrote this, they're some pretty smart people, and you can learn from them too. And so if you approach it that way, it's amazing how much support you can get.
Thank you. And I have one last question, and that's basically in a world where the CPG industry, there's a handful of customers which are incredibly dominant, Walmart, right, Target, Costco, a couple others. How do you manage, how do you, as a brand manager, how do you work in that environment where you're basically trying to make it work for one?
Yeah, well, it's another good question, Chris. I mean, Walmart Inc. to us, so this is Walmart and Sam's, is almost 28, 29% of our business in the U.S. Now, we're about 78 U.S., 22 outside the U.S. I was in artillery, so we add very quickly. We can add quickly. When somebody is that dominant in retailing, 26, 28% of your business, what really insulates you is your brands and the power of your brands. I mean, like I said earlier, 90% of our brands are number one or number two in their space, and the best thing that we can give a retail partner is a brand that actually sells. So if it turns off the shelf, they're going to keep you. You don't want to be a number three or number four brand in this environment, that's for sure, because you are at their mercy. So it's extremely important to keep the vitality of your brands really healthy. You really got to drive those brands, and so you're not only driving the health of the legacy brands, but you're also driving a constant flow of innovation. I mean, we have a long-standing objective with our investors that we will drive our top line 3 to 5% every year. 2 years ago, we drove 4.5%. Last year, we drove 3%. This year, we have an outlook out there at 2 to 4%. You just got to keep delivering that, and we've gotten about 3 points, 3.5 points almost of new product growth the last couple of years. So we have really doubled down on innovation. And if you've got very healthy brands and you've got a constant stream of innovation, these guys will really partner with you. Your assortment will stay fine on the shelf. You'll get the shelf space you need. You'll get the merchandising support. You'll get the pricing you need. If not, though, given the consolidation in this country, where you've got now about 5 retailers who account for almost 45 to 50% of the all-commodity volume in this country, the only thing that keeps the barbarians at the gate is brands. I mean, you know, they have. I think the retailers have developed much better brand management inside their own ranks. I mean, if you look at private label and retailer brands today, I think they're much more effective. Their quality's getting better. And of course, in this economic downturn, a lot of people are trying these brands that didn't try them in the past. So that's really sharpened our game as well. But at the end of the day, retailers want brands that sell, and they need traffic in their stores. And so having number one and number two brands is your best insurance about being able to navigate through a consolidated world.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have